And joining us now here in studio, Jonathan Kay, author of Among the Truthers. He's also a columnist at the National Post. And John, it's good to see you again. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Okay, the killing of bin Laden. Let's do this right off the top. Do you think that with no photograph being released and no body being presented, the administration has helped set up the conditions conducive to those who say, I'm not sure it happened?
You could say that. On the other hand, if they released the photo, within minutes you'd have conspiracy theorists poring over it, telling us why it was fake. You saw that with the long-form birth certificate that Obama released. Just before I came to the studio, I went to WorldNet Daily, which is a leading birther website, and they claim to have found new anomalies in the image which show that it was just a computer-generated forgery. So yes, you could have discouraged some from conspiracy theories by showing photos of a dead bin Laden, but I don't think it would have killed off hardcore conspiracy theorists because they don't believe any information the government provides.
So no information is ever enough to conclusively prove something to their satisfaction. Is that the point?
Well, the hard psychological kernel of this is distrust of not just the government, but all public authority figures, the media, NGOs, large corporations. And if you don't trust what you're being told, you don't trust the images, you don't trust any evidence, then it's never going to be enough. This is the hallmark of conspiracist thinking, that if you appeal to one authority, and then another authority, and then another authority, it just expands their list of people they think are in on the conspiracy.
Let me read a bit of a tweet here from actor and writer Kumail Nanjiani from Los Angeles. He said, "Oh, just discussing the Osama bin Laden conspiracy theories with my ma and grandma. Turns out he's either alive or was killed elsewhere and planted in Pakistan." So apparently grandmothers are not sold on the official story either. Again, could the administration have done something different to have prevented any of this kind of stuff?
Well, as I understand, there is video available based on helmet cams being worn by SEAL team members. And I suppose if you wanted to, you could release that video. On the other hand, that video also could have been filmed in an LA studio. And is it really worth enraging large parts of the Muslim world showing this video when you're not even going to convince hardcore conspiracy theorists? Probably not, right?
How is it that we have arrived at a point where even if every T is crossed and every I dotted, many still won't believe?
A lot of it has to do with the media. We're on TVO, it's mainstream media. A lot of people don't get their news from the mainstream media. They get it from internet websites. And a lot of the people I interviewed for my book, if I mention the National Post or TVO or anything like that, they just dismiss it with a wave of the hand. They say, oh, that's just government propaganda. And instead they're getting their news from very narrow channels, populated by other people who share their views, and these become echo chambers for conspiracy theorists.
Shall we ask you the question directly then? Did the government have any involvement in your book?
I wish. I'd probably have driven here in a fancier car if that were the case, but sadly I lacked any government funding.
Did your masters at the National Post have any say in what you wrote?
They gave me some time off, so yes, and they were sort of my time off bosses. Not my paymasters during that period. But look, the National Post gets exactly the same kind of accusations. One of the reasons I was interested to write the book is I'm an editor of the National Post, and I'm always getting emails from people saying, oh, what do your paymasters think of this, and why are they telling you not to write this story or that story? And there's a suspicion out there that there's some central authority overhanging every media institution telling us what stories to cover or not cover. And of course, I can attest that that's not true, but people outside the media believe that that's the case.
Who's in charge of the central authority?
Well, that's a very interesting question. In my book, I talk about several theories. There's the Bilderbergers, the New World Order, the neocons. In some conspiracy theorists' mind, they just call it the oligarchy, because they're not quite sure what it is, but they're sure it exists. But what's interesting is no matter who the bad guy is in these conspiracy theories, the structure of the conspiracy theory is always basically the same. I heard the same story over and over. It was just the names are changed depending upon what the person's object of suspicion is.
I'm going to ask our director, Michael Smith, to put up this graphic that will show the decline in trust in the United States from starting back just before 1960 to present day. And that line bounces up and down, but it inexorably goes in one direction, which is how much do you trust the government in Washington? And by the time you get to present day, not very much. How much would you attribute the increase in conspiratorial thinking to that red line?
That's a huge component. And if you combine that with the internet, which gives people a medium for giving vent to their distrust, and also the power of video. Many of the conspiracy theorists that I spoke with, they became radicalized by watching YouTube videos, movies like Loose Change, which can now be made very cheaply or for free. If you combine those elements, that is a recipe for conspiracy theories.
What is it about America that makes it particularly fertile ground for this?
Well, part of it is its history. America was born in revolt against what you might call a conspiracy to occupy it, a foreign occupying power, the British. And the idea that there is some foreign power that seeks to reassert control over patriotic Americans, whether it's the United Nations or the communists, or Europe in general, or international bankers, this is hard woven into the nation's political DNA. I also argue that it's part of the evangelical Christian tradition, the idea of this cosmic battle between good and evil, which finds secular expression in conspiracy theories against the United Nations and stuff like that.
Now, conversely, we in Canada were not born out of a revolution, so we have tended for 150-odd years to be more deferential to government, not nearly as significant a Tea Party in this country as there was down south. But when you hear comments like, Stephen Harper has a hidden agenda, over and over and over, is that playing in the same kind of sandbox?
I mean, a little bit, but the level of radicalized thinking we have here in Canada is just an order of magnitude less than you see in the United States. I mean, you may say that Harper has a secret agenda, but no one is claiming that he's going to set up death panels or that he was actually born in another country and he's actually an Islamist he wants to impose Sharia on Canada, which is one of the conspiracy theories I heard about Obama. Canada is just, writing the book made me appreciate how moderate Canada is in comparison. The recent election campaign, we've complained about how shrill things have become, but it's nowhere near as shrill as the United States. It's made me appreciate that.
We talked in the opening about the moon landing. You could add JFK's assassination, 9/11, the operation against Osama bin Laden. It sounds like most of this stuff happens in the United States, but I read in your book that actually you can go back a few hundred years to Europe and it starts there. You want to give us the best example?
Yeah. A lot of it started after the French Revolution. But then you go forward to the early 20th century. The Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which is a tragically influential hoax from the early part of the 20th century, which blamed Jews for all the wars and all the depressions and this and that. And still I get emails occasionally from people who still claim that it's true, even though it was debunked within months of its publication. But if you actually look at the structure of the protocols, the way it sets up this villain that in secret controls the entire world, the basic structure of the conspiracy theory contained in the protocols has been replicated in all sorts of conspiracy theories, including conspiracy theories about 9/11. Now, modern conspiracy theories tend not to be anti-Semitic because racism and anti-Semitism have fallen into such disrepute that even most conspiracy theorists won't touch it. But the basic structure of the conspiracy has remained unchanged for a century.
There's still a lot of Jew hatred involved in conspiracy theories, isn't there?
There is, but they tend to use euphemisms. So, for instance, instead of calling someone a Jew, they'll call someone a Rothschild Zionist. Or sometimes neocons is used as a tag for Jews. But sometimes you actually do get, dare I say, principled conspiracy theorists who refuse to traffic in conspiracy theories involving Jews. I've been to conferences, actually, where people have been, these are conspiracy theorist conferences, where people have been shouted down when they say something that's anti-Semitic.
But John, you're Jewish. So you are not the right, I mean, they're going to think you're not the right messenger to be delivering this message.
Yeah, well, you know what? The fact that I'm in the mass media makes me not the right messenger. When I wrote my book, I didn't have any illusions that it would convince any hardcore conspiracy theorists to change their mind because who am I? I'm someone who writes in the National Post, and so the message is tainted right from the get-go. The book I've written is for people who haven't yet gone down the rabbit hole as a precautionary measure.
Are there differences among the conspiracists that come at it from a right-wing versus a left-wing point of view?
It's very interesting you say that. At first I expected yes, but what I found was the narrative actually converges. So for instance, 9/11 conspiracy theorists, I'd interview the ones on the left, and they say, oh, this was all a plot by Halliburton and Dick Cheney, and they want to deliver control of the world oil supply to corporate elites. And then I would talk to right-wing conspiracy theorists, and they'd say, oh, this is one big plot to create a one-world government, the United Nations. And so they would have different villains that they imagined, but the basic theme of the conspiracy theory was exactly the same. It's just they had different ideas about who was the evildoer behind the scheme.
Take a look at the monitor over my shoulder because we want to play a little bit of tape here. This is Raymond D., who's a guy who moved to London a few years ago, and, well, I will let him pick up the story. Michael, roll tape, please.
During my research, I came upon lots of information regarding the Masons, the Illuminati, corrupt governments, the New World Order, many of these fascinating topics. which ultimately depressed me somewhat when I learned the horror and the true nature of the evil people that actually are in charge of this planet and in charge of our governments, in charge of our everyday lives. You know, they're here to essentially ruin it for all of us, and they're doing a pretty damn good job at the moment. It's a pretty depressing place, this world. Consequently, lost the respect of my friends, my family. I lost my job. I lost my wife. I lost my son.
How common is that among conspiracists that they change their views and then lose everything?
It's a sad phenomenon. What happens is that the loss of trust in society becomes so corrosive and so overpowering that they alienate the people around them. It becomes essentially a form of religion. It's a religion without a God. Instead, it's a religion with a demon, but without a God. And in the same way that marriages suffer strain if one person becomes extremely religious and the other person doesn't, I've interviewed conspiracy theorists, and sometimes I've interviewed their spouses just because I want to find out their perspective. And the relationships that tend to survive are where both spouses sign on to the same conspiracy theory.
John, where are you on UFOs?
UFOs, I was actually disappointed how few of the conspiracy theorists I talked to believed in UFOs. And actually the moon landing also was not a big theme. I only ran into one guy who was big on the moon landing. But generally speaking, conspiracy theorists, the modern political ones, have no time for the moon landing. It doesn't interest them. It seems to be something that they regard as quaint.
But UFOs?
There are certain kinds of conspiracy theorists who do believe in UFOs, and sometimes they crop up in strange places. For instance, Ernst Zundel, a Holocaust denier and a conspiracy theorist who used to live in Canada, he believed that Hitler had actually moved to Antarctica, where he was in communication with other intergalactic species using spaceships. So sometimes you'll be talking to a conspiracy theorist about one subject, and they will bring up UFOs in some completely unrelated context, which surprises you.
Do you believe yourself in UFOs?
I have no evidence of any form of extraterrestrial intelligence.
Okay, before we invite a group of 9/11 truthers to join us here, you had to, I guess you revised your ideas about them. Tell us what you thought of them beforehand.
Sure.
Then you met them, studied them, wrote about them, and what you think now.
My old view of conspiracy theorists was the stereotype of Mel Gibson in the movie Conspiracy Theory, sort of this confused loner, people who wore sandwich boards and gave you smudged leaflets on the street, people who couldn't hold a job. But the reason I wrote the book is because some of them started emailing me, and I realized that these are highly intelligent people. They had degrees. Some of them were professors, engineers, bureaucrats, and highly articulate, highly lucid. They'd spent years researching it, and they couldn't be dismissed as mere outcasts. And the reason I wrote the book is I wanted to find out, why do people who are obviously highly intelligent, why do they go down this rabbit hole? And that was the motivation for writing the book in the first place.
Do you think they're dangerous?
Generally speaking, the danger they pose is it's not violence. The 9/11 truthers who I followed generally were very polite people. In fact, they'd have these marches in New York, which I attended, and if the police told them to go to one side of the sidewalk, they'd go. I never saw any of them arrested. They're not threatening violence. All they want is to put, as they see it, the ringleaders like Dick Cheney on trial. The only danger they pose is to civic discourse. The idea of us having a shared reality where we could talk in the same space, that's the danger. It's more of an abstract danger than it is an actual physical danger.